The transport ship's metal floors vibrated beneath Du-Han Kim's feet as it approached Nexus 7 Galactic Detention Center. Through the small window of his holding cell, he watched the massive space station grow larger. It looked like a giant metal spider, with 8 long arms stretching out from a central hub. Red warning lights blinked across its surface like evil eyes in the darkness of space. Du-Han stood straight and calm, his military training showing in his posture even after 3 months in temporary holding cells. At 6 feet tall, he wasn't particularly big for a human, but his muscular frame spoke of years of special forces training. His black hair was cut short according to prison regulations, and his dark eyes carefully studied everything around him. "Move to the back of the cell, human," a harsh voice ordered through the speaker. Du-Han did as he was told, keeping his face neutral. The ship's security droid appeared at his cell door, its red sensors scanning him. "Hold still for final processing." A blue light passed over Du-Han's body. He had already gone through 5 security checks since leaving Earth, but he knew this was standard procedure. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and most alien species didn't trust them yet. "Prisoner 847B," the droid announced, Du-Han Kim of Earth, charged with smuggling restricted terraforming technology. Security rating: medium. Special note: first human prisoner in Nexus 7 facility. Du-Han wanted to argue about the charges again, but he knew it was pointless. He had been set up, and until his lawyer found proof, he was stuck here. The droid led him out of the cell and down a long corridor lined with other holding cells. Most were empty, but in some, he could see alien prisoners watching him with multiple eyes or sensing organs. The ship docked with a heavy clang. Du-Han followed the droid through several security checkpoints, each one staffed by different alien species. Some he recognized from his military briefings: the tall, thin Arctians with their gray skin and the stocky Krellians with their armor-like scales. Others were completely new to him. "Processing room 4, the droid announced, stopping at a large door. "Enter and wait for staff instructions." The processing room was cold and sterile. 3 prison officers waited inside, 2 Arctians, and what appeared to be a human woman. Du-Han looked at her with surprise. She wore the black and silver uniform of Nexus 7 security staff, and her nameplate read Officer Park. "I am Officer Jae-Yun Park," she said in English, her voice professional and distant. "I will be handling your intake processing. Please state your name and planet of origin for our records." Du-Han noticed she spoke with a slight Korean accent, like his own. It was strange to find another Korean all the way out here, but he kept his face neutral. "Du-Han Kim, Earth. You understand why you are here?" she asked, typing on a holographic screen. "I was falsely accused of smuggling restricted terraforming technology," Du-Han replied calmly. "My case is under appeal." One of the Arxian officers made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Officer Park didn't react. "Your personal belongings have been logged and stored. You will be issued standard prison clothing and basic hygiene items. Any questions?" Du-Han shook his head. He had read the facility guidelines during his transport. The next hour passed in a blur of scans, photographs, and paperwork. Finally, dressed in the gray uniform of Nexus 7, Du-Han was led through a series of secure doors toward the prison's general population area. "Block C, Cell 2187, Officer Park announced, stopping at a cell door. "This will be your assigned living space. Meal times and recreation periods are listed on the wall display. Any violence or rule violations will result in immediate punishment. Do you understand?" "Yes, Officer Park," Du-Han replied. The cell door slid open with a hiss. It was small but clean, with a bed, toilet, sink, and a small desk. The wall display showed prison schedules and rules in multiple languages, including English. Du-Han sat on the bed, listening as the door locked behind him. He had barely settled in when voices echoed from the corridor outside. The universal translators implanted in all prisoners' ears converted the various alien languages to their native tongue. Heard they brought in a human today. Really? One of those Deathworlders. They don't look so tough to me. Soft skin, no natural weapons. Duhan recognized the sneering tone of prison gang members testing a new arrival. He had expected this. Earth was classified as a death world by galactic standards due to its higher gravity, aggressive wildlife, and extreme weather. Most alien species thought humans were dangerous, but they didn't understand why. The cell block's recreation period began an hour later. Duhan's door slid open automatically, and he stepped out into the common area. It was a large space with tables, exercise equipment, and entertainment screens showing news from various worlds. About 30 other prisoners were already there. All conversation stopped when Duhan entered. He felt dozens of alien eyes studying him. Most of the prisoners were species he recognized: Archons, Krellians, and a group of 4-armed Kraz warriors in one corner. The Kraz were known for their strength and aggressive nature. They were watching him with particular interest. Duhan walked to an empty table, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. He had learned in Special Forces training that predators often mistook stillness for weakness. These aliens might be dangerous criminals, but they were still predators at heart. He had just sat down when a shadow fell across his table. Looking up, he saw 3 Kraz warriors standing over him. Their leader, massive even for his species, had scars across his upper arms and face. "You're in my seat, human," the scared Kraz said, his translator making his voice sound like grinding stones. Duhan looked around the room. There were plenty of empty seats, and he knew this was a test. How he responded would determine how the other prisoners treated him. "I don't see your name on it," Duhan replied quietly, not moving. The Kraz leaned down, all 4 hands gripping the table's edges. "Maybe you don't understand how things work here. I am Moldak, leader of the Ravager Syndicate. When I want something, I take it." Duhan met Moldak's 4 yellow eyes calmly. "Maybe you don't understand how humans work. We don't respond well to threats." A tense silence fell over the recreation area. Even the guards watching from their elevated posts seemed to hold their breath. Moldak's face twisted in what might have been a smile or a snarl. "You're either very brave or very stupid, human," Moldak growled. "We'll find out which soon enough." He straightened up and walked away, his followers close behind. Duhan remained at the table, his posture relaxed, but his senses alert. He noticed Officer Park watching from her guard post, her expression unreadable. Other prisoners were whispering among themselves, some looking impressed, others concerned. A older prisoner with gray-green scales, a Krellian, sat down across from Duhan. "I'm Haenul Choi," he said in heavily accented English. That was either very clever or very foolish, standing up to Moldak. Duhan raised an eyebrow at the Korean name. The Krellian noticed his surprise and made a rasping sound that might have been a chuckle. "I spent 20 years on Earth as a cultural exchange scholar. Loved it so much I took a Korean name. Got caught up in some trouble after I left. Ended up here." "What kind of trouble?" Duhan asked. Haenul's scales rippled in what might have been embarrassment. "Let's just say I missed Earth food too much and tried to smuggle some restricted ingredients. The Galactic Council has very strict rules about transferring biological materials between worlds." Duhan nodded, grateful for the friendly conversation, but staying alert. In places like this, everyone had an angle. "What can you tell me about Moldak and his Ravager Syndicate?" "They control most of the illegal trade in Block C: food, medicine, contraband, entertainment files. Moldak ended up here after his group hit a civilian transport ship. He's dangerous, but not stupid. He'll wait, watch for weakness." Haenul's voice dropped lower. "Word of advice. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy. Most species are scared of you, but they don't know why. Moldak will try to prove humans aren't as tough as everyone thinks." "Let him try," Duhan replied quietly. Haenul made that rasping laugh again. You military types are all the same, no matter the species. Just remember, in here, it's not about who's strongest. It's about who has the most friends in the right places. The recreation period ended, and prisoners returned to their cells. Duhan lay on his bed, thinking about Hainul's words. The Krellian was right. He needed to be smart about this. A direct confrontation with Moldak would only lead to more violence. That night, as artificial lights dimmed to simulate night cycle, Duhan heard movement in the corridor. Through his cell's small window, he saw Officer Park doing her rounds. She paused at his cell, her eyes meeting his for a moment. "Sleep well, prisoner 847B, she said formally. But as she turned away, she added in Korean, barely above a whisper, "Watch your back." Duhan closed his eyes but didn't sleep. His mind was already planning, analyzing, preparing. He had survived worse situations during his Special Forces career. This was just another mission. Stay alive, gather intel, wait for an opportunity. In the darkness of his cell, Duhan smiled slightly. These aliens thought humans were dangerous because of their strength or speed. They didn't understand that humanity's real advantage was something else entirely. The ability to adapt, to learn, to turn any situation to their advantage. Moldak and his gang would learn that lesson soon enough. But first, Duhan needed to understand the complex web of relationships and power dynamics that ruled Nexus 7. As his Special Forces instructors had always said, knowledge wins wars before they even begin. The first night in Nexus 7 passed slowly, filled with strange alien sounds and the constant hum of life support systems. Duhan Kim, former Special Forces operator and now the first human in Galactic prison, remained awake and alert. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready. After all, humanity hadn't survived on their death world by being weak. The game had begun, and Duhan intended to win. 3 days passed in Nexus 7, and Duhan Kim quickly learned the prison's routines. Every morning, the cells opened automatically for breakfast. Prisoners walked to the dining hall in groups, watched by armed guards in elevated positions. The food was bland but edible, processed nutrition bars designed to meet the dietary needs of various alien species. Duhan sat alone during meals, watching and learning. He noticed how different alien gangs controlled different tables. The Ravager Syndicate, led by Moldak, always took the central tables. They acted like they owned the place, demanding extra food from weaker prisoners. On the fourth morning, Duhan's routine changed. As he walked to breakfast, Officer Jae-yun Park stopped him in the corridor. "Random security check, prisoner 847B, she said loudly. But when she patted him down, she whispered in Korean, "The guards on level 3 are working with Moldak. They turn off cameras during recreation hours. Be careful." Before Duhan could respond, she waved him through. Her warning confirmed what he had suspected. Corruption ran deep in Nexus 7. In the dining hall, Duhan collected his breakfast and headed to his usual corner table. But today, someone was already sitting there. It was Sung-ho Lee, the prison's medical officer. He was human-looking, but his slightly blue-tinted skin marked him as a half-Arctian hybrid. "Mind if I join you?" Duhan asked, setting down his tray. Sung-ho gestured to the empty seat. "I was hoping to talk with you. I've treated many prisoners in my time here, but never a human. Your medical file is fascinating." Duhan started eating his nutrition bar while Sung-ho talked about human biology. He noticed Moldak's gang watching them closely. Having a medical officer as an ally could be useful. "Your bone density is remarkable," Sung-ho continued. "And your muscle mass. Earth's gravity must be incredible." 1.3 times galactic standard, Duhan replied. "Makes us stronger off-world, but we don't like to advertise it." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash. At the center tables, Moldak had knocked over a smaller alien's food tray. The creature, a spindly-looking being with 4 eyes, cowered as Moldak's gang laughed. "That's enough," the voice called out. Du-Han turned to see Hae-Nul Choi, the Korean named Krelian, standing up at his table. The poor guy just wants to eat in peace. Moldak turned all four arms toward Hae-Nul. Mind your own business, old one. Unless you want trouble. Du-Han watched carefully. Hae-Nul had been kind to him, and his instincts said to help. But in prison, rushing into fights was dangerous. He needed to be smart about this. Actually, Du-Han said loudly, standing up, it is our business. He walked over to the fallen tray and helped the small alien pick up its spilled food. Looking directly at Moldak, he added, everyone has the right to eat their meal without harassment. The dining hall went silent. Moldak's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied Du-Han. The human's calm confidence seemed to confuse him. You're making a mistake, Deathworlder, Moldak growled. You don't want us as enemies. Du-Han smiled slightly. I don't want you as anything. I just want to finish my breakfast, same as everyone else here. He helped the small alien to Hae-Nul's table, then returned to his seat with Sunho. He could feel Moldak's anger from across the room, but the Kraz warrior didn't make a move. Not yet. After breakfast, Sunho walked with Du-Han to the recreation area. That was either very brave or very foolish, the medical officer said. Moldak doesn't forget challenges to his authority. I know, Du-Han replied, but sometimes you have to take a stand. In the recreation area, Du-Han noticed more prisoners nodding to him or making their species equivalent of respectful gestures. Standing up to Moldak had earned him some attention. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. He was using one of the exercise machines when Officer Park's voice came over the speakers. Recreation period ending in 5 minutes. All prisoners returned to cells. Du-Han finished his workout and headed for the exit. As he passed through the doorway, someone shoved him hard from behind. He caught himself before falling, turning to see one of Moldak's gang members, a muscular Kraz with cybernetic arms. Watch where you're going, human, the Kraz sneered. Du-Han said nothing, just kept walking, but he stayed alert, knowing this was just the beginning. Back in his cell, he heard voices in the corridor. Moldak wants him dealt with, someone whispered. During next shift change. The human. He doesn't look so tough. Boss says make it look like an accident. Can't have the guards asking questions. Du-Han lay on his bed, appearing to rest while his mind worked. The shift change would happen in 3 hours. He had until then to prepare. His cell contained nothing that could be used as a weapon, but that didn't worry him. His Special Forces trainers had taught him that anything could be a weapon in the right hands. The afternoon passed slowly. Du-Han did push-ups and stretches, keeping his muscles warm. He thought about Officer Park's warning about the corrupt guards on level 3. Would they help Moldak's gang attack him? Probably. 2 hours before shift change, Hae-Nul appeared at Du-Han's cell window. They're planning something, the old Krelian whispered. I heard them talking about the maintenance corridor on level 3. Be careful, friend. Du-Han nodded his thanks. Hae-Nul moved on before anyone noticed him. The maintenance corridor. That made sense. It was far from the main security cameras, and if the corrupt guards turned off the few cameras there. When his cell door opened for the pre-dinner recreation period, Du-Han was ready. He walked toward the main recreation area, but took a different turn, heading for level 3. If Moldak's gang wanted to ambush him, he would choose the battleground. The maintenance corridor was dimly lit and narrow. Pipes and cables ran along the walls, carrying power and life support to different parts of the station. Du-Han found a spot where the corridor widened slightly and waited. He didn't wait long. Heavy footsteps approached from both ends of the corridor. In the dim light, he counted 6 figures, 4 of Moldak's gang members, including the one with cybernetic arms. Moldak himself wasn't there. Of course not. Gang leaders rarely did their own dirty work. Look what we found, the cybernetic Kraz said, cracking his metal knuckles. A lost human. Du-Han settled into a relaxed stance, hands loose at his sides. Not lost. I was looking for you. That seemed to surprise them. The Kraz laughed. Heard humans were crazy. Guess it's true. Last chance, Du-Han said calmly. Walk away now, and we can forget this happened. They didn't walk away. Du-Han hadn't expected them to. As the first Kraz rushed forward, Du-Han allowed himself a small smile. These aliens were about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders. The fight that followed would be talked about in Nexus 7 for months to come, but that was a story for another day. The first Kraz warrior charged at Du-Han in the dim maintenance corridor. Time seemed to slow down as Du-Han's Special Forces training took over. He noticed everything. The way the Kraz's cybernetic arms moved slightly slower than his natural ones, how the alien's weight shifted forward too much, leaving him off balance. Du-Han stepped to the side at the last moment. Using the Kraz's momentum against him, he grabbed one cybernetic arm and pulled. The warrior crashed into the wall, metal arms sparking against the pipes. Before the others could react, Du-Han was already moving. In Earth's stronger gravity, Du-Han had trained his muscles to be quick and powerful. Here in the space station's standard gravity, he felt light and fast. He ducked under a punch from the second attacker and struck back with precise hits to nerve clusters that were common to most humanoid species. The second Kraz dropped, his legs giving out. 2 down, 4 to go. How is he so fast? One of them shouted. They tried to surround him, but the narrow corridor worked in Du-Han's favor. They could only come at him 2 at a time. Up in the security center, Officer Jae-Yun Park watched the fight through the few cameras that weren't disabled. Her hands moved quickly over the control panel, saving copies of the footage to a secure drive. This would be valuable evidence later. Back in the corridor, Du-Han fought with calculated efficiency. He didn't try to match the Kraz warrior's strength. Instead, he used their power against them. When one swung a heavy punch, Du-Han deflected it into another attacker. When they tried to grab him, he turned their grip into a throw that sent them stumbling. Earth's gravity, Du-Han explained calmly as he fought. 1.3 times what you're used to. Every movement I make here feels light. Every strike carries more force than you expect. A Kraz with facial scars snarled and rushed forward. Die, human. Du-Han sighed. They weren't learning. He stepped inside the Kraz's reach and struck 3 rapid blows. Throat, solar plexus, knee joint. The alien fell, gasping for air. Basic hand-to-hand combat worked on most species. Pain was universal. The cybernetic armed Kraz had recovered and tried to attack from behind. Du-Han heard the whir of mechanical joints and moved. The metal fist hit the wall where his head had been, leaving a dent in the metal. Du-Han grabbed the artificial arm and used a leverage point he'd noticed earlier. With a sharp twist and pull, the arm came loose from its socket. My arm, the Kraz screamed. He ripped off my arm. The last 2 attackers looked at each other, then at their fallen companions. One turned and ran. The other pulled out a makeshift knife, probably stolen from the kitchen. That's not a good idea, Du-Han warned. When the Kraz lunged anyway, Du-Han caught his wrist and applied pressure to specific nerves. The knife clattered to the floor. In under 3 minutes, the fight was over. 6 of Moldak's best fighters lay on the ground, groaning or unconscious. Du-Han hadn't killed any of them, but they would be feeling the pain for weeks. He picked up the fallen knife and broke its blade against the wall. Tell Moldak that I don't want trouble, but I won't run from it either. As if on cue, heavy footsteps approached. Moldak himself appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by more gang members. The gang leader's yellow eyes widened as he saw his defeated warriors. Impossible, Moldak growled. No single being could. But I did, Du-Han interrupted. Want to try for yourself? Moldak stepped forward, then stopped. Something in Du-Han's calm stance made him hesitate. This wasn't a normal prisoner. This was a trained warrior who had just defeated 6 Kraz without breaking a sweat. Stand down, Moldak ordered his remaining gang members. To Du-Han, he said, this isn't over, human. Yes, it is, Du-Han replied. Unless you want everyone to see the security footage of your people attacking me, I'd wonder what the prison board would think about that. Moldak's eyes narrowed. The cameras are off. The guards made sure of it. Du-Han smiled slightly. Are you sure about that? Want to take that risk? Up in the security center, Officer Park allowed herself a small smile as she secured the last of the video files. The corrupt guards hadn't disabled all the cameras. They hadn't known about the backup systems she'd installed. Moldak looked at his fallen warriors, then back at Du-Han. The human hadn't moved, but something about his stance suggested he was ready for more fighting if necessary. The gang leader made a decision. Perhaps we can discuss this like reasonable beings, Moldak said carefully. Perhaps we can, Du-Han agreed, starting with leaving other prisoners alone during meals. Moldak's facial tentacles twitched, a sign of frustration in his species, but he nodded. We will. Consider your suggestion. As Moldak's remaining gang members helped their injured companions up, Du-Han walked calmly past them. He had made his point. Humans weren't just strong because of their muscles or their combat training. They were strong because they knew when to fight and when to offer peace. In the medical bay, Sung-Ho Lee treated the injured Kraz warriors. Remarkable, the medical officer muttered as he examined their injuries. Perfect strikes to incapacitate without causing permanent damage. Who taught you to fight like that? Earth Special Forces, Du-Han replied. We train to end fights quickly while minimizing harm. Dead enemies can't learn to become allies. News of the fight spread quickly through Nexus 7. Prisoners who had feared Moldak's gang began standing up for themselves. The corrupt guards became more cautious, knowing someone was watching them. A new balance of power emerged. That evening, Officer Park stopped by Du-Han's cell during her rounds. Interesting security footage from Level 3, she said quietly in Korean. Seems Moldak's gang had an accident. Several accidents, actually. Accidents happen, Du-Han replied in the same language, especially when bullies pick fights they can't win. The prison board will be reviewing guard assignments after this incident, Park continued. Some staff changes are coming. Change is good, sometimes. Du-Han understood what she wasn't saying. The corrupt guards would be replaced. The evidence she gathered would make sure of that. In his cell that night, Du-Han thought about Earth. His home planet was called a death world because its gravity was stronger, its weather more extreme, its wildlife more dangerous. But those challenges had made humanity stronger. They had learned to adapt, to think creatively, to find solutions that didn't always involve violence. Yes, he had won the fight. But more importantly, he had won something else, respect. Not just fear or intimidation, but genuine respect. The other prisoners had seen that humans could be both powerful and merciful, both dangerous and fair. Newell visited briefly before lights out. You've changed things, the old Krellian said. Moldak's gang isn't the only power in Block C anymore. The others look to you now. I don't want power, Du-Han replied. I just want peace. Newell made his rasping laugh. Sometimes keeping peace requires strength. You showed them that today. As artificial night fell over Nexus 7, Du-Han Kim, the first human in Galactic prison, allowed himself to relax slightly. The day's events would have lasting consequences, but he had handled them as his training demanded, with precision, control, and a clear objective. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. His case was still under appeal, and Moldak might not accept his loss gracefully. But for now, in the quiet darkness of his cell, Du-Han had proven something important. Humans weren't just another species to be bullied or controlled. They were survivors, adapters, problem solvers. And sometimes, the best way to teach that lesson was to do it one punch at a time. 2 weeks passed after Du-Han's fight with Moldak's gang. Life in Nexus 7 changed in subtle but important ways. The dining hall became quieter, more orderly. Weaker prisoners no longer had their food stolen. Even the strongest aliens thought twice before starting trouble. Du-Han kept his usual routine, but he noticed the differences. Other prisoners nodded to him respectfully. Some even asked to sit at his table during meals. He welcomed them, slowly building a network of friends and allies from different species. One morning, Officer Jae-yun Park arrived at his cell earlier than usual. "Prisoner 847B, come with me. The prison board wants to speak with you." Do-han followed her through corridors he hadn't seen before. They took an elevator to the administrative level, where the walls were cleaner and the lights brighter. Park led him to a large conference room. Inside, 5 beings sat at a curved table. Do-han recognized the prison director, a tall Orcian with silver skin. Next to him sat representatives from other major galactic species. They studied Do-han with various types of eyes and sensing organs. "Prisoner Kim," the director spoke through his translator. "We have reviewed some interesting security footage from 2 weeks ago. Officer Park brought it to our attention." Do-han said nothing, just stood at parade rest, feet apart, hands behind his back. It was a military stance that seemed to make the board members more comfortable. "The footage shows members of the Ravager Syndicate attacking you," the director continued. "It also shows several guards deliberately turning off security systems. Most interesting, a holographic screen appeared, showing the fight from multiple angles." Do-han watched himself take down the 6 Kraz warriors with precise, controlled movements. The board members murmured among themselves. "We have questions," said a reptilian board member. "First, why did you not report the planned attack?" "With respect," Do-han replied, "reporting it would have only delayed the inevitable. The problem needed to be solved permanently." "By fighting?" asked another board member. "By teaching a lesson," Do-han corrected. "I could have killed them. I chose not to. That sent a more important message than any amount of violence." The board members discussed this among themselves. Finally, the director spoke again. "We have made some changes based on this incident. Several guards have been dismissed for corruption. Moldak and his top lieutenants have been transferred to separate facilities." Do-han nodded. That explained why he hadn't seen the gang leader recently. Additionally, the director continued, "We received a communication from Earth today. Your case has been reviewed. New evidence has emerged proving your innocence in the smuggling charges." Do-han's calm expression didn't change, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Officer Park, standing by the door, allowed herself a small smile. "You will be released within 3 days," the director said. "However, we have a request to discuss with you first." This was unexpected. Do-han raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Nexus 7 has never held a human prisoner before," the director explained. "We did not understand your species well. Your handling of the Ravager Syndicate situation was educational. We would like to offer you a position." "A position?" Do-han asked. "As a security consultant," the director clarified. "Many of our procedures are designed for standard galactic species. We need someone who understands both human capabilities and proper control techniques. The pay would be significant." Do-han considered this. It wasn't what he had expected when he was first brought to Nexus 7, but life rarely followed expected paths. "I have conditions," he said. The board members leaned forward, listening. "First, complete reform of the guard screening process. No more corruption. Second, a proper rehabilitation program for prisoners who want to change. Third, Officer Park leads the new security protocols implementation." Officer Park looked surprised at this last condition. The board members discussed among themselves in various languages. Their translators turned off. Finally, the director spoke. "Your terms are acceptable. When can you start?" "After I visit Earth," Do-han replied. "I need to clear my name properly and close that chapter of my life. Then I'll return." The meeting ended with handshakes and various alien gestures of respect. As Officer Park led Do-han back to his cell to pack his few belongings, she spoke quietly in Korean. "You're really coming back?" she asked. "To a prison. To a place where I can make a difference," he replied. Humans aren't just strong because of our muscles or our combat skills. We're strong because we adapt, we learn, and we help others adapt and learn too. Later that day, in the dining hall, Duhan sat with Hainul and Sumho. The old Krellian was telling stories about his time on Earth, making the medical officer laugh with tales of trying human food for the first time. "What will you do after release?" Sungho asked Duhan. "I'm coming back," Duhan replied. "As a security consultant. Things are going to change around here." Hainul made his rasping laugh. "They already have, friend. They already have." That evening, Duhan stood at his cell window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the death world that had shaped humanity into what they were. The galaxy called humans dangerous because they came from a harsh world. But they didn't understand the most important lesson of Earth. It wasn't the strong gravity that made humans tough. It wasn't the extreme weather or dangerous wildlife. It was the fact that humans had learned to overcome these challenges not just through strength, but through intelligence, cooperation, and determination. The next morning, as Duhan packed his few belongings, other prisoners came to say goodbye. Some he had helped directly. Others had simply benefited from the changes his presence had brought. Even a few former members of Moldak's gang came, offering awkward but sincere gestures of respect. Officer Park arrived to escort him to the release processing area. As they walked through the corridors of Nexus 7, Duhan thought about the strange path that had brought him here. He had arrived as a prisoner, falsely accused and angry at the injustice. He would leave as a free man, but he would return as something more. A bridge between species, a teacher, a symbol of humanity's true strength. "Ready to go?" Officer Park asked as they reached the processing area. "Ready to begin," Duhan replied. 3 days later, Duhan Kim boarded a transport ship back to Earth. But this time, he wasn't in a cell. He stood at a viewing window, watching Nexus 7 grow smaller in the distance. In his pocket was a data card with his new contract, and in his mind were plans for making the prison better. The galaxy had learned something important from his time in Nexus 7. Humans weren't just deathworlders to be feared. They were beings of complexity and contradiction, capable of great strength, but also great restraint, dangerous, but also just, powerful, but also wise. As the transport ship entered faster than light travel, Duhan smiled. Sometimes the best way to teach understanding wasn't through fear or force, but through example. He had shown that humans could be more than what others expected. Now he would help build a place where others could learn to be more than they thought possible.